In 2018, Portugal became one of the very few countries boosting a seemingly all-encompassing self-ID law. The effects and repercussions of this law were, for the most part, hidden from public discussion. As in many other countries, in Portugal, trans issues and gender identity ideology have gone from a niche, fringe interest to receiving a lot of positive attention in the media and achieving in a few short years what many human rights movements could not achieve with decades of work. Not only concrete changes to the law, but international support from politicians, health organizations, and so on, which allowed for these changes in the first place. While the process to have one's gender identity changed and legally recognized was very long, involving individual court decisions, the surgeries that purpose to change one's sex to match perceived gender identity have been paid for by the public health system since 2005. And have also been an option in the private sector. Interestingly, since 2005, it appears that Portugal has gone against the trend in other countries by having more women seeking gender reassignment surgery than men, according to the surgeon João Décio Ferreira, who was at the time the only one working with this type of procedure in the public sector, claimed that he had done 33 operations on women seeking to identify as men, and only 11 on men who claim to identify as women. Is this happening because high sexism and male chauvinism in the country? That's my question about this. The process to change one's sex marker and name in official documents was long one because the people seeking to do it had to effectively sue the government and allege that the mistake had been made regarding their gender identity. So the goal of this law was to expedite the process and turn it into just another administrative act that could be done by anyone provided they were of legal age, over 18, had a medical report made by a multidisciplinary team with a diagnosis of perturbation of gender identity, and were willing to pay an administrative fee. The public document regarding this discussion in Portuguese Parliament stated, in translation, this new procedure is justified by the fact that the current solution for these cases is not the most appropriate for reasons of justice and because this is the path most followed at European level. In 2012, gender identity was recognized as a characteristic to respect and not discriminate against in the students' statute and ethics in schools. In 2015, gender identity became a protected category in the labor code. Both of these changes went by largely unnoticed. In October 2017, they held a debate regarding proposals by parliamentary parties to change the law to allow teenagers of 16 to change their name and sex marker without requiring a medical report. One proposal, made by the party Bloc de Esquerda, even thought to criminalize parents who refused to allow their children to change their name and sex marker. This is absolutely crazy. Although this was not approved by Parliament, the proposals to remove the need for a medical report and lower the age to 16 did eventually succeed in 2018. When the self-ID law was passed with an overwhelming majority in the Portuguese Parliament, the opposition came from right-wing parties. All parties on the left voted for the law. Support for the measure was justified with apparent worldwide scientific consensus. The self-ID law also effectively ends sex-segregated spaces. For instance, in 2022, it was decided that prisoners would be housed in jail according to their gender identity and not their sex, regardless of whether or not they had undergone any medical procedures. By 2018, there was a bigger, more concentrated effort to center trans issues and gender identity ideology in the public's consciousness. For instance, manifestos for pride marches all over the country started to give trans people and non-binary identities an even greater focus. And some women's organizations started to back this ideology. The ones who don't have not publicly focused on this issue. This was intensified in the years since the self-ID law was approved, and the most widely seen media have conveyed these issues in a broadly positive light. This is not to say there have been no negative articles in the press, but these are usually only opinion pieces. There are two major problems here. The first being that these opinion pieces are not written by experts, examples from psychology, medicine, sociology, or etc. We have a dialect of professionals from these fields willing to publicly speak up and criticize the gender identity movement. The second problem is the fact that almost all of these opinion pieces seem to be written by conservatives. In addition, no established women's organization has publicly taken a stand against gender identity ideology yet, and all parties on the left either appear to publicly support it or do not explicitly oppose it. This encourages the idea that the criticism is only coming from the right wing. Some pieces made by male psychologists, published by a major national newspaper, Público, have explicitly referred to puberty blockers as completely reversible, while claiming scientific neutrality. And all of this is happening while funding for academic research about trans-identified people keeps increasing. A campaign that took place in 2022, applied named ABC LGBTQIAA+, draws attention to the ever-changing language of gender identity ideology. This was developed and promoted by Fox Live, a TV channel that is part of the bigger Fox group, with the help of ILGA Portugal. Several posters were displayed in various cities explaining terms like dead naming, gender identity, and non-binary, and the definitions also appeared on TV in one of Portugal's major newspaper, Público, and online. All these definitions, including those for lesbian, gay, and bisexual, omitted any mention of biological sex, replacing it with gender, even when it makes for awkward reading, such as with the definition of trans. Person whose gender identity and or expression does not match the gender assigned to them at birth. This reflects a relatively recent trend in gender identity ideology, where one can no longer even say that a male claiming to be a woman was indeed born a male. It is an erasure of the body through the manipulation of language, and is even contrary to the premise that first allowed the ideology to take off, since the original myth was that the trans woman had a woman's brain in a man's body. Acknowledging biological sex was at one point important to explain why there was a need of transition. In addition to the ILGA's organization, there are a growing number of other organizations producing updated guides, such as this year's ex-equo guide on health and laws, trans in Portugal, resources and procedures, where they advise on legal issues, medical issues, school context, family context, steps for medical transition, hormonal interventions, surgery, family planning, sports, and so on. They criticize the laws, affirm they are still very rigid, and do not follow international norms of World Professionals Association for Transgender Health, that there is constant policing of non-normative bodies in sports, among other statements that aim to reinforce and expand social pressures on those who do not agree with this ideology. Portugal does not have any laws that criminalize feminicide, despite having a huge domestic violence problem that seems to get worse every year. 13 women were killed in domestic violence incidents in the first 6 months of 2022. In 2021, the total reported was 16. This does not take into consideration the human trafficking of women and girls for sexual exploitation in the prostitution system itself. Instead, each march has been focusing out our marches and their agendas. The Commission for Citizenship and Gender Equality is a public administration body supervised by the Office of the Secretary of State for Equality of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. Its mission is to ensure the implementation of public policies within the scope of citizenship and the promotion and defense of gender equality. The network was created in 2004 and is the only European space where government representatives can meet and share knowledge, discuss common challenges, and possible measures to combat discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sexual characteristics. To date, the network is made up of 34 European states that hold biannual meetings. In addition to work meetings, the program includes workshops in parallel sessions and appointments of organizers of the IDAHOT Forum, International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. The Commission for Gender Equality represents Portugal in the government focal points network for LGBTY issues. It is in 2019, with approval of a national equality and non-discrimination strategy, Portugal Plus Equal, that Portugal has an autonomous plan entitled Action Plan to Combat Discrimination on Grounds of Sexual Orientation, Identity and Gender Expression, and Sexual Characteristics. According to the Genitourinary and Sexual Reconstructive Unit of Coimbra's Hospital and University Center, on social medias, there is a growing number of young people under the age of 18 looking for surgery, as well as a growing number of cases of children wanting to change sex that we hear about nowadays. The growing on even younger population in Portugal is happening, and the social media is working in that direction. Despite of this, one of our members from WDI have been at a reading book for kids organized by drag queens last month at a very popular marketplace, and the place was empty, zero audience. Only some random customers passing by the book area to grab some free coffee. So I've made this resume with the help of another woman from WDI Portugal, and this is just to make you aware of the situation right now in Portugal, and I hope that we can join and create solutions for these laws and these ideologies that is increasing in the population and without really scientific information. Thank you.